Or to the cloud, and then share my screen and go from there. Okay, perfect. Can you guys see this okay? Perfect. Thanks, Kevin. Um, so thank you guys, as I said, thank you all for being here. My name is Christina Cardona. I'm the coordinator for internships and career programming for Rockefeller College. And I appreciate you guys taking the time to learn about networking here with me today. And as I just mentioned, this workshop will be recorded, so feel free to refer back to it anytime you would like. And yeah, so we'll go ahead and get started. And I'm just thinking if there's anything I forgot to mention, but I think that's it. Oh, with questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll probably, if I see them coming in, I'll be able to answer them, but it will likely be at the end if you guys have any questions, and I'll leave plenty of time for questions as well. So, and feel free to use the raise hand function, whatever works best. So yeah, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And this presentation is networking, building a circle of contacts. We have our government and nonprofit career fair coming up on October 8th. So this is really good timing, especially like going into career fairs such as that one and other networking and career events. All right. So, just a little bit of what we're going to be talking about today. So, our agenda, we're going to go into what is networking, building your network or your circle of contacts, some kind of do's and don'ts, if you will, of before, during, or after you network, what an elevator pitch is, creating a personal brand, what not to do during networking, going over some types of networking, going to do a little bit of an interactive discussion. So any insights you guys have and want to share would be great. We're also going to go over some effective networking strategies, benefits of networking, tools, platforms, and resources, and then wrap it up with some upcoming networking events and a little bit just about our office and how to make an appointment. And you're welcome to make a specific networking appointment, especially leading up to networking opportunities such as career fairs. All right. So first off, what is networking? So I am going to answer this, but I just want to give you guys a chance. If you'd like to answer that, feel free to raise your hand, unmute yourselves. And just before we go into the details, what does networking mean to you? Any takers? I can move on to. If you guys aren't sure, totally fine. Yeah, Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, well, to me, networking is essentially just, I mean, you could kind of sum it up like this, but it's really like aggregating yourself in a way where you can meet, a bunch of people, whether it's in your industry or otherwise, for the intent of, growing like inter and extra personal relationships.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Yeah. And I like what you just said about intent, because I think that's a huge part of it. And that's what we're going to talk more about is that it, like, the term itself, networking, I feel like can be kind of, you know, I don't know, it can seem a little foreign or a little just like unclear because it's not, I don't know, it's just like a one of those professional type words, as it were, that it's like, what does that really mean? And intentionality is really important with that. And as Kevin, like you just said, what it is it's professional relationship building. So beyond just social interactions. It's like with the intent of building a professional relationship and consistently following up additional outreach, for example, as well with that relationship. So it's not supposed to be just like a one-time connection or interaction. So it's about maintaining a circle of contacts, and we'll talk about who that can be and who kind of encompasses that circle. But it's all about, again, consistency, follow up, and long term relationship building rather than just for the purpose of getting a job. And that is something that always comes to mind of, oh, okay, got to network to get a job or get an internship. And like, yes, that's partially true. And networking can lead to job and internship opportunities. That's a big part of it. But that also doesn't mean that once you leave an internship or a job or any sort of like professional event, that it means that that is the end. You know, it should be an ongoing relationship. And when I say here a two-way street that's mutually beneficial, kind of like I just said, you know, it shouldn't just be like, hey, can you give me a job? And then you're not providing anything for them. The focus is that if especially you're likely going to be in the same field, if it's somebody who you're doing professional networking with, it's, oh, do you have insights that you can share with them? Do you have any opportunities to share with them, whether it's in person, via email, LinkedIn, whatever the case it may be? It's about con intentionality, you know, in contributing to that relationship rather than it just being you asking and them giving. You know, it's should be a give and take that is beneficial for both parties involved. And it's really important, as I said, in getting an internship and a job opportunity or both. But it's also should be kind of like with the intent of learning too. So again, not just for the advantage of getting a job and being done. You know, it should be about, oh, I'm curious to network with certain individuals because I want to learn more about the field and it just keeping an open mind and learning about their story and their career journey is helpful whether or not you're looking for an internship, just to have that circle of contacts, like I said, which we'll talk more about in a second. So and your network should be a base of contacts that you have. So, and we're going to go over that right now. And it's also helpful to just keep track of who is in your network, especially, of course, your professional network in this case, so that while you're looking for opportunities or while you're contributing to that relationship by sending relevant articles or information or connecting and following up on how things are going on your end in your career, it's helpful to just keep track of those people so that you can easily maintain those consistent long time professional relationships and connections. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? All right, perfect. Thank you, Kevin. Okay, so moving on. So building your circle of contacts. So where can I start? So at first it might seem like, oh, they just have to be contacts in a professional setting who you work with or who you've had an internship with, but they really can start from friends, family, like I just mentioned, work colleagues, but it could be like colleagues of your family, people that your parents work with or that your family friends work with, your family friends, neighbors, etc. And it's about leveraging existing personal contacts. And that doesn't necessarily mean, again, leverage doesn't mean like use in a negative way, but it's more of like utilizing your network so that you can, again, like give opportunities to them and they can give them to you in more of a mutually beneficial way rather than just, you know, asking for a job. And I'll probably say that a bunch of times, but it's about that long-term connection and keeping in touch with your network, whether it's virtually or in person or by giving back too. For example, I went to Binghamton University for my graduate school degree. And I would even say in my network are my professors who I had, my classmates. You know, if I had a classmate post something on LinkedIn asking for a panelist or a speaker to talk about their current career journey, a way that you can contribute to those professional relationships is by saying, yeah, I'd be happy to participate. You know, there's no payment out of that. It's more of just that you're giving back to them and you're just existing slash growing your network and contributing to it. So, and with professional connections, sometimes it can also be easy to forget like who does that make up, you know, especially in new situations, like in a new internship, the people that even if it's not your direct supervisor, if you work on a larger team in an office, for example, there's likely many people there who if you get the chance to sit down with them and connect with them, you know, they're also part of your network that you can ask career related questions of, you can assist them, they can assist you, all of the above. professional organizations and affiliations, like being involved in conferences or affiliations within your field. Over the summer, for example, I went to the Eastern ACE conference for career employers, right? So that was an opportunity for me that my supervisor recommended to go to that helped me build my professional network, practice networking with a variety of employers slash because it was again not for me to get a position there, it was for me to learn more about the industry and what other people do, insights in our field, etc. But attending those types of events is helpful in both networking, growing your network, and just learning, and that's all part of it. So academic connections, especially as you guys are students at UAlbany and in Rockefeller, if you're involved in leadership organizations, if you're on a sports team, if you're in other clubs, these people are all part of your network. So that's why it's important to just be mindful of, always be open-minded to a variety of contacts because you never know where those opportunities might lead. So, just a couple things before you start networking. So, planning ahead is really important, especially, for example, if you're planning on attending a career fair. Like we'll use the government and nonprofit fair, for example, on October 8th. So, prior to attending this fair, planning ahead, you can even see on Handshake who's attending, what employers are attending the event. Making notes of those organizations and those employers and who they are, and then seeing, okay, these are people that I'd like to talk to, preparing some questions ahead of time that you want to ask them so that you appear prepared, that you feel confident, and that you can have engaging, enriching conversations with those people and it might sound a little like self-explanatory, but it's really important, these small details, especially in these types of settings, bringing a pen, bringing notebooks, a notebook, business cards, making sure to dress professionally, showing that you really want to be there in whether it's a career fair or another type of networking event, because that's a representation of you and your professional image. And of course, you want it to be a good one. So that's why we always mention that as well. And like I just said, with planning ahead, doing your research. If you don't know that much about the organization or the employer that you plan to speak to, researching the company ahead of time. What's their mission? What are their company goals? Are there potential opportunities that they are going to promote at the fair? And that doesn't mean that you go up to the table and say, hey, so could I get a job from you guys? You got to kind of not do it in that immediate direct way, but more so in seeing what are they offering and even just learning from them, asking questions of what types of candidates would they be looking for if they are hiring. It's about more, like I said a bunch of times already, more than just getting a job. It's all of these other pieces encompassed as well. So just overall demonstrating intentionality, asking questions that you really want to know. You can ask, are there opportunities available? But just making sure that it's in a way that's professional, respectful, and that doesn't appear to be like urgent or immediate, because then that's not showing a professional, image, if that makes sense. So also, before you network, setting clear goals. What do you want to achieve from your networking efforts? What do you want to learn? What types of organizations do you want to speak to at these events? And also just knowing your own interests, your worth, your value, so that you can also feel confident and prepared when you're having these conversations. And on that point, it's can be very nerve-wracking. I mean, I have felt the same way myself in these situations, with meeting new people and networking, and they're dressed professionally, especially if they've been in the field for, of course you would be too, but they've been in the field for a long time, you're a little nervous of, oh, I don't want to say the wrong thing, etc. I think that just knowing that they want to, if they're at these events, they want to speak with you, but just being again professional, respectful, valuing their insights and their time, but then also taking the time ahead of time to prepare, scheduling an appointment with the career services office and how best to prepare for networking events and going through strategies and stuff like that, which we're going to go over in the upcoming slides too. And crafting your elevator pitch, which we're going to go over right now. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to interrupt as well or raise your hand. So, what is your elevator pitch? So, basically, when you're preparing to network, when you're preparing to go to a career event, whether it is a in-person career fair, whether it's a online virtual panel, whether it's really anything, right? Anything in the professional world, is that you want to have a concise, clear elevator pitch, about 30 seconds, about that's showing your intentionality when you're at these types of events, right? So of course, everybody has great life stories, and that's not to say that you can't tell that at a different time, but in this type of setting, there's only limited time. That's why the term elevator pitch kind of was created, because it's supposed to be the amount of time that you're in an elevator with someone, right? So that's like the analogy. So for example, I just made this example up, but hello, my name is Joe Smith. I'm a junior at UAlbany's Rockefeller College of Public Affairs and Policy. You can state the year you're graduating. I'm hoping to work in state government after graduation. Currently, I'm an intern at the New York State Department of Labor. I read a little bit about your organization and I was wondering what you're looking for in a candidate. So, telling a little bit about yourself, showing that you've researched, that you know about their organization, but you'd like to learn more, but you're keeping it open-ended enough that they can say, respond in a way that they'll share what they're looking for, or they'll ask you follow-up questions, just when you're doing this, whether, like I said, it's virtually or in person, making eye contact, smiling, showing that you want to be there and that you are intentional with your efforts. So, and with that being said, before I go into like during networking situations, just wanted to go over creating a personal brand, which kind of ties in with this, is showing like, okay, what do I want to represent? How do I want to express myself? How do I want to authentically, but also professionally attract opportunities in my desired field or industry? And some qualities, like I just mentioned, of smiling, firm handshake, if that's what the employer does first. I know post-COVID little can be a little different. But just in general, showing that you are there not because you just want to, check this off your list, that you signed up to do a networking event or to be open and involved in this type of event. You want to show that, and that will positively contribute and show your personal brand and your desire to be there, but then also will tie in when you have your virtual personal brand, whether that's like on LinkedIn, for example, that's consistent with how you're showing up in person, how you are just showing up in these types of settings. So it's important to have a personal brand to control your online presence, but then also, as I said, your in-person presence, and show that that's consistent across the board. So, thinking about when you're going to these types of events and when you're virtually networking or connecting with professionals or colleagues or anybody else in your network in your field of interest, thinking about like, what is my brand? What can I offer? What message do I want to convey to someone who's looking at my LinkedIn profile, someone who's talking to me? That's why it's kind of tied in with like smiling and, showing that you want to be there, because it's all related, even if it's in different, like I said, virtually or in person. And also seeing, all right, who's my target audience? Who's interested in my content? This could be on LinkedIn, for example, looking in your network as you're connecting slash like sending invitations to connect, that it's not just connecting with everybody just because you see random names. It's seeing like who would be interested in my content in my field, the sites that I'm sharing, the stories that I'm reposting, the content I'm creating, and Yes, it's a little different in person, but it's kind of similar when you're connecting with people in your field and you're demonstrating your professional goals, your interests, etc., because it helps you still have a wide circle of contacts, but also narrow it because you want your circle of contacts and your network to be reflective of you and specific to you. And again, intentional, and that it's not just a random list, you know? So that's how this all kind of coincides. And also establishes trust in your field, shows you as a reputable individual who wants to learn, who's interested in being there, and that is how it works across the board. So, any questions about that? All right. I'll move on here. So, kind of off that same point, creating a personal brand, crafting your story, that's your elevator pitch as well. But it can expand if you're having a conversation, you know, that goes beyond the elevator pitch. But before you do that, you want to have a strong hook or a strong elevator pitch that shows what you are representing, what you're looking for, and just what you know, what your personal brand says about you. But it's also something that you want to be honest about. You want to not say, oh, I've had 10 plus years of experience in a certain field that you haven't had. It's the same thing as I've that's on your resume or cover letter. You know, you want to be authentic and proud of your accomplishments and express that whether it's in writing, in person at networking events, virtually in networking scenarios or virtual panels, conferences, events, etc. But again, authentic and consistent is the theme you'll hear me say a bunch of times here. So, sharing your insights on relevant professional platforms like LinkedIn, professional organization, group pages, etc. For example, like I had joined the Eastern ACE like conference group on LinkedIn, right? So like things like that, showing follow-up interest and interest in continuing to be involved in certain organizations can help with your career advancement and also help grow your network as well. So, like I said, maintaining an online presence, showing interest in others' work and accomplishments. So, like, for example, that's something that I know I keep mentioning LinkedIn because that is like the most popular virtual networking platform. Um, and this workshop is focused on networking rather than LinkedIn. We do have another LinkedIn specific workshop that is linked at the end that goes into, you know, how to create your profile and more specifics, but just to keep it more specific on networking for the sake of this. But that being said, they are so, you know, related in that an example of what you can do on LinkedIn to build your network, engage, etc., is like if a colleague of yours is posting a relevant story, if they just got a new job, or if they, you know, got a certificate in something, you know, engaging with that contact content, liking it, celebrating it, you know, adding comments to any of their experiences, right? Responding and engaging goes a long way because it just shows your interest and intent to be in their network as well. And I just attached, I'm not going to click on them for right now, but I found a couple great websites that really help with personal branding. So, the 7 pillars of a strong personal brand, I really liked creating a purpose-driven personal brand. And if we have time, we can always click back to these, but I'll also share these slides with you all just for your own reference. And as I said before, it's just important that you maintain a consistent professional profile through your personal brand in person and virtually through LinkedIn. We have the UAlbany Career Advisory Network, which I'll mention at the end, etc. So during networking, I know I mentioned this a bit before, but it's really important to introduce yourself, you know, when the time is right. As you're doing that, give your elevator pitch and feel, you know, as I said, it's likely going to be a nerve-wracking experience, but practicing your elevator pitch, practicing what you want to say to employers, to people that you're networking with in those settings can help you feel more confident, right? So doesn't mean you're not going to be nervous at all, but it does help, you know, just like with anything else. Also, reading their body language, just like a rule of thumb, these types of career fairs, other networking events that are larger, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of different conversations going on. So just keep in mind, they're busy just as everybody else is, right? But like, just keep in mind that you want to come back to them when they're done talking and they're ready to talk to the next person, which again might sound a little self-explanatory, but you don't want to come across like too eager or too like in their face because you again want to make a positive impression. So feel free, mingle, look at other tables, talk to other people, and you can always go back to the employer or organization that piques your interest the most. Asking questions and also just making sure they're questions that you want to know the answer to, right? So there's a reason why you're there, or there should be a reason why you're there. So make sure that, again, with that preparation, that your questions are intentional, that you're listening to the answers, you're taking notes as, appropriate and as applicable, so that you can just be taking it all in, right? And that it's going to be a valuable experience that you can follow up with those specific employers or contacts with, right? So, and like I said, especially if your preferred employer happens to be in another conversation, it's still good to kind of circulate and see what are other options, because there's likely options out there, whether it's employers, organizations, or just conversations waiting to be had that might not be with your first choice employer, but are still going to be really valuable and might open you to another opportunity or another frame of reference or perspective that you didn't expect to have. So just again, keep an open mind and you never know where opportunities might lead. So definitely keep that in mind as you're networking like in the moment. So some of these, I know they sound, again, a little self-explanatory, but they are still good to review. So just things that stand out, right? So what not to do during networking events. So I know a lot of times everybody is multitasking, we have our phones, we have computers, all of that, right? But especially in this type of event where they don't know you well, they likely don't know you very well. You want to make a good, I'm sorry, I just clicked on the wrong slide here. There we go. Okay. So you want to make sure that you appear and are present, right? You don't want to be like, oh, answering a text on your phone while you're talking to an employer, or even showing that you're waiting for the conversation to wrap up, right? Like you want to show your interest, your intentionality, and you don't want to look like you can't be bothered because they're going to remember that. And it might sound like, oh no, they're not going to remember they talked to so many students, but like they're going to remember a student who gave them a business card, seemed happy to be there and interested in what they had to say, asked questions, followed up, rather than someone who they met but did no follow up and didn't seem particularly present in during their conversations. So just keep that in mind. And also, as I said before, with dominating conversations, like make sure that you're asking them how they're doing. You're not just getting right into, okay, so I need a job. What can you do for me? Right? Or not really listening and, they're just like I said, you're talking the most, which is what I mean by dominate conversations here. So it's important to have a balance of like not being silent, because if you're silent, then it's like, okay, what are you doing here? What is your goal? But also a healthy balance, like with any conversation of, back and forth, right? And again, being prepared, you don't want to appear unprepared, like you're asking them for something, but you haven't done any research or you don't really know anything about their organization, So that's just something to keep in mind. And also with appropriate dress, it has gotten like in recent years more casual, but it's still important for these types of events still to dress either business professional or business casual, depending on that's a situation where I would talk to our office before, say like, okay, what do people typically wear in these types of situations? And I'm sure you guys have heard this before, but it's always better to be a little overdressed than underdressed. So it's good even if you don't have like a full suit on for a career fair that you're attending, you still have like a nice button down shirt and nice pants or something like that. And I just provide that as an example of like that rather than, a t-shirt and shorts, right? Because that's not sending the message that you're as serious, even if it sounds a little silly, it is, those things do go a long way, especially in those quicker interactions when you're only meeting someone once. So another thing is a lot of times at in-person networking events, not as much virtually just because it doesn't really work that way, but like there's a lot of times food or drinks or something, right? And you just want to be mindful of, especially if you're shaking hands with someone or you're talking, you don't want to be more focused on your food or over drinking, right? And then give off a bad impression. So again, I know it might sound a little silly, but it is really important because these impressions go a long way. And I already talked about the immediate or aggressive requests. So yeah, just keeping in mind like listening, asking questions, following up. Those are really like the key pillars of these types of events. So I know I'm talking talking a lot here, but do you guys have any questions, anything that you'd like to add here? I'll just give you a minute. All right. Oh yeah, Kevin, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just curious when it comes to like, like the whole idea of like having a personal brand, do you think it's
Yeah.
important, especially for like remote students, to like actively be like posting on like a social media platform to like engage with people in that way?
So do you mean like for social media, do you mean like LinkedIn?
Yeah, or like something of like the equivalent to like really like demonstrate, your professionalism on the internet.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that like that's a good point with like remote students. Like I think that yeah, I think even like especially if you're a remote student and you're not, which is totally fine, but if you're not going to in-person events as frequently based on like distance, location, etc., absolutely. I think like posting stuff on LinkedIn or like you said, an equivalent, sending like networking via email, setting up an informational interview with someone that you is in your field or that you're, familiar with, right? Like even though those things are relevant, of course, and really important for networking, like for both for in-person students too, absolutely. I think that I wouldn't say you have to like, go up. I don't want to say not go above and beyond, you know what I mean? But like I think that virtually networking is still extremely like just as important. And honestly, I feel like at least in a more formal way, more common than in person now too, or
Mm.
just as equally common. So does that answer your question though, Kevin?
No, it does. Thank you.
Okay, good, good, perfect. Any other questions you guys have? Like I said, we'll have time at the end too. But okay, so I'll move on. So as I mentioned, after you network, timely communication goes a long way. Follow-up email, it's the same thing as if it's after an interview, right? So like you have a conversation, a professional conversation, you want to show your interest. You don't want to wait like 2 weeks to send a thank you email. They're already going to be like they're not going to be they might not remember you at that point, right? And I know that sounds a little harsh, but it's really like in those types of situations, it doesn't have to be a book long thank you email, right? But it can be something as simple as like, you know, dear Mr. Smith, it was great meeting with you, or it was great meeting you at the government and nonprofit fair and learning more about your industry and your organization. I would love to set up a time to connect with you via Zoom or in person. Please let me know if you are like open to this and your availability, and we can, find a time. Thank you again for your time and for speaking with me. And you can sign it like best Kevin, for example. So the reason I provide that example is like it doesn't have to be super long, but it does show, intentionality. It shows follow up and that you are also interested in having that person in your network too. And just that it's a mutually beneficial relationship, right? And staying connected. Also, if a position was discussed, especially if it's at an internship fair and there's internships being posted or advertised from a specific organization. It can also be helpful to attach your resume too. You don't have to phrase it as in like, please read my resume and give me feedback, not like that, but more of just like, here is my resume for your reference or something like that, right? Just to show you're interested, that they remember you and that they have a fate. They met you at a networking event. Now they also have both a face to a name, but your further like living document resume as well, too. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. Offering value, like in that thank you email, you could also add something like, I also wanted to share this article that I found relating to our conversation, right? That had to do with something you guys had discussed at the fair. And also, they will likely, if they don't mention connecting on LinkedIn, that could be something you even ask at the fair. Or if you don't, and I keep using the fair as an example, it could be any networking event. Um, but even if it's not in that moment that you discuss connecting via LinkedIn, you can always send them a message to connect. And LinkedIn does give you that option. When you press connect, it lets you send a message with it. So you could say like, oh, like this is, or you don't have to say this is, but like, I guess you could, depends on what you want to say, but like, this is Kevin from UAlbany. I would love to connect with you following our conversation at the career fair to discuss further opportunities or to share career insights or anything industry insights, right? So that's just an example. And like I mentioned earlier, just organization can also go a long way just for your own sake. Keeping a spreadsheet with your networking opportunities. Like if you went to the career fair and you talked to three employers and you have their contact information, just keeping track of that on one document and even indicating any follow-up you plan to do with them. Really anything related to networking and your like networking goals too. You can also organize within that spreadsheet. Just a good way to stay organized and to make sure that you stay connected with your circle of contacts in your network. So that's something I've done myself that's been really helpful. I just use like a Google Sheets or an Excel sheet, but helps me keep track. Okay, where do I know this person from? What was our interaction, and can help you with like timely follow up for if you haven't contacted someone that let's say it's a previous internship you haven't contacted them in a while, but you had a great experience and you'd like to stay connected. You can always just make some reminders to yourself to stay organized on that spreadsheet as to when you plan to connect with them again. It doesn't have to be every week, every month even, but just if you want them to be in your network, you'll have to maintain that outreach and communication, even if it's every like couple of months, right? So just some examples of types of networking, right? So like it can range, like we talked about, it can be events like in-person or virtual career fairs, information sessions, panels, whether that's in person or virtually. If a speaker is coming and you attend an event and then you talk with the speaker after, or you talk with the other participants who went to that event, that's an example of networking, right? Any sort of receptions you go to, like happy hours, conferences, industry specific seminars, internships. Like I said, even if you don't think of that as networking at first, because it might be something you're doing as part of for credit or whatever, right? It's still something where you can expand your network and set up conversations with those individuals to learn more about their career journey and or their career journeys. And those are people that will be in your network as you build your professional experiences. So we already talked about LinkedIn, other like online groups, organizations, etc. And a very common type of networking is informational interviews, which we do also have a separate workshop just on that as well, called You Can, and it's called Career Chats with a Purpose. So I would encourage you guys to take a look at that for additional tips. but they are very similar too, in that you want to make sure to, again, be prepared, follow up, do your research ahead of time, and all of those things. But they can, of course, be offered virtually and in person too. And the goal is to learn more about a specific individual's industry, career goals, career journey, etc. Right? So just another way to network, but a very common one. Sometimes it can be meeting up for coffee or tea or whatever, whatever you drink, whether it's coffee or tea. But of course, there's more that I didn't list, but these are just some common examples, right? And as I said, specific tips for informational interviews and for networking can also be found in our networking handbook and within that career chats with a purpose workshop as well. So this is something I know you guys are are kind of quiet besides Kevin today, which is totally fine. But if anybody else would like to share, an experience about when they networked or a career fair they attended or just anything you took away, that would be great. And you don't have to answer, of course, all of these questions, but just like, how did it go? Anything you took away. What are your future goals for networking conversations? Is there anyone now that you're hoping to network with, right? So anybody have thoughts on any of these questions or experiences they'd like to share? Yeah, Bianchi.
I hi, I don't really have too much experience networking, but I have had a couple experiences and one that I took away, I want to say was mostly positive, but I want to say it was negative because I did not keep in person I did not keep in contact with that specific person. However, I feel like a tip, but also something that went well for me was that he loved talking about his college experience. Like he loved that when he originally went into college, he didn't end up doing what he did at the time that I met him.
Mhm.
So I feel like that was it kind of made me feel a little better to know that you kind of have to keep yourself flexible and even if you don't know exactly what you want to do right now, you'll usually end up in a good spot. And I think that was a really good advice. And just kind of, I mean, the whole point of networking, of course, is to gain a little bit of benefits, but I feel like it's a good point as to almost like you're talking to a friend. I feel like it's a good tip, but I don't know. That's what I would say.
No, that's great. Thank you so much. No, I appreciate that. No, and I really like what you said about like that they're going to share, like likely people that you're networking with or that you're having an informational interview with, like they are going to share their insights and be a great example or a great like informational interview is when they're honest and authentic, just as you're being, right? Like in those responses. So like you said, Bianchi, like if they're sharing like, oh, you know, this is not my career journey has kind of gone in a lot of different directions. It hasn't been one linear path. Like that's really helpful. And like you said, it's really reassuring. And I think it just further shows like you never know what those conversations are going to bring. And they might bring up something like, oh, have you ever considered going into this specific like sector of this field? Or would you ever consider working for, I don't know, a certain organization, even if it's not directly with them? I feel like you mentioned, it can be really eye-opening. And the other thing is like, I mean, there's been people that I have networked with who I have also not kept in touch with, but I think with that being said, it just is like a good reminder going forward. You can't be in touch with everyone, but especially people that you are interested to, stay in their circle and for you to be in theirs and all of that. Or, vice versa is what I mean. Um, and just putting an effort to do so, even if it's not with everyone, it's still important. And even just following up, at least initially, thanking them for their time, and you can always reach back out, is important too. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. No, thank you. And building confidence is a big like theme too. So thank you very much. So I'll just move on here. So just some quick, effective networking strategies. So not stopping networking once you've secured an internship or job, right? So that can be something, especially as you get into like a full-time position, you're like, okay, good, I'm set, right? I'm settled. But like, it's still important, regardless, to be involved in organizations, continue networking with people in your field, because that doesn't mean you're automatically looking for your next role, but it's just important to be staying relevant with, insights in your industry, with what they're doing, sharing tips, sharing interests and stuff like that, right? So, and also just connecting with people of all levels of experience, keeping an open mind, like I talked about before, preparing intentional questions that you want the answers to. I know I talked about that a bunch. Staying organized, we discussed that too. And even just setting aside time in your schedule for networking and professional development to ensure you reach specific goals. And that can be, like I said, doesn't need to be, every single day, but maybe just setting some goals for yourself. Okay, twice a month, I'm going to reach out to a new contact that I'd like to connect with and set up an informational interview with, or something like that, right? Or once a month, I'm going to do that. And once a month, I'm going to attend a professional development related event. So there's so many ways you can do this. And it's also just the most important thing is the future and the continuation of these interactions is just the follow up, right? And showing interest, as I keep mentioning. So, as Bianchi said, like some benefits of networking include confidence building, because once you network once you have these conversations, you go to events like this, you're going to build your confidence. You're going to be continuing to practice your elevator pitch and building your personal brand, right? Also, mentorship, relationship building, you're growing your network. You could also find someone who really is interested to show you a specific side of the industry or field, like a mentor that can help you within your professional development as well, which is a great benefit of networking. Gaining different perspectives, keeping an open mind. And also, when I say hidden job market, a lot of times positions aren't always publicly posted and can be more like word of mouth. So, with that being said, if somebody at a career fair, an employer says, oh, well, we haven't posted this position yet, but you seem like you would be great for it. So, like, I'm going to follow up with you and send you, the information. That's a way that you're already finding out about job and internship opportunities without, you're doing it in an in-person or again virtual way, but it might not be something that's publicly posted, but you're being aware of these opportunities, right? So that's another great way and great benefit of networking, is the most obvious of access to job and internship opportunities that you might not have had as quickly if you hadn't connected with the employer at a fair, for example. So these are just some further tools, platforms, and resources. So I know we talked a lot about LinkedIn. We also have the Rockefeller College LinkedIn group, which would be really helpful for you guys to join. Also, UCAN, the U Albany Career Advisory Network. We also have the Rockefeller College Virtual Career Series. This isn't as much of a networking tool. This is just our YouTube channel where we have that Career Chats with a Purpose workshop I referenced, Boost Your LinkedIn Profile and Engagement, and other workshops. But these are just two that are very relevant to, as well as the Rock Your Career Fair one, relevant to the specific workshop. The networking handbook really just follows up on this workshop as well from today. Idealist is another great site for exploring potential opportunities, but then also expanding your network. And I would definitely, like I said, visit the Rockefeller College and join the Rockefeller College LinkedIn group to see what are alumni doing, what are other people, your colleagues, and everybody else associated and affiliated with Rockefeller College. There might be Rockefeller College specific opportunities and people you'd like to connect with that you can get access to if you join this group. So, just a few examples of some other upcoming networking events. So I won't read them all, but we have on October 6th, for example, this is a panel. It's not a fair, but it's a legal careers panel. So if you're interested in going to law school and you want to attend this panel and you ask questions of the panelists who have careers in the legal field and connect with them following, they might say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to keep that student in mind for specific opportunities in the future, you know? So that's just a great benefit, right? And some other fairs include we have a graduate and professional school fair coming up. Of course, the government and nonprofit job and internship fair, like I mentioned, law school fair. We have some other information sessions coming up too. New York State Watch, CHC and Rockefeller, New York State Civil Service, career and internship information session. And we have a careers in state government panel and more that are not on this slide. So feel free to keep looking at your email if you haven't gained access yet to the new SharePoint Rockefeller newsletter as well. Definitely do that and just look to your email for that as well. So, and also visiting our office if you'd like to schedule an appointment with me or with my colleagues, Joan and Ashley, or utilize our drop-in hours, especially leading up to networking events or for any other career-related topics, feel free to do so. And we meet both virtually and in person. So definitely keep that in mind and you can reach out to us with any questions. And I just put my email here following this for this presentation too. And that is all I have for you guys. So I will open it up for any questions and I will also stay on if anybody has questions after the fact. So I'm going to stop sharing and just pause the recording for now. Okay, let me just do that.